Hello, and welcome to the Flicks Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today, we have Netflix's 94th film. It's the 2018 thriller Calibre. It's directed by Matt Palmer and stars Jack Lowden, Martin McCann, and Tony Curran. I'm Jesse, and I am here with my co-host MJ. Hey, MJ.
How are you, mate?
Good. How are you?
I'm very, very well.
It's nice to have a thriller film on the agenda for today, I think.
We went pretty hard on rom-coms for probably 5 or 6 movies, with maybe 1 or 2 in between that weren't. But thrillers, when done right, are a really satisfying watch for me. I mean, I don't necessarily have genres that I like. I do have genres that I like, but I tend to think of myself as quite eclectic. But when I hear I'm going to watch a good thriller, it does excite me.
Yes, and we have had a couple of thrillers over
Yeah,
the year and a bit that we've been doing this show on Netflix. So it's yeah, like you said, I'm on board with something that's a little bit different to a rom com
yeah,
because
just for the time being. Yeah.
they have filled up our time lately. So nice to have a bit of a misstep or a step somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly right. Well done, Netflix. Thank you for keeping it interesting.
Good. All right. Well, we start our show with our fast flicks, where we do our own little summary of the film. So, MJ, what's your fast flicks for this one?
A hunting mishap spirals out of control when 2 friends are forced to cover up a murder and leave the audience on the edge of their seat as a result.
Yeah, lovely. There's not much you can say about this one without wanting to give too much away. So yeah, I'll give mine, and then we'll go through our spoilers. I think.
Yep.
Because,
Yeah, good call. Very good call.
We're gonna spoil. So I've said, the same thing. It's a hunting trip which takes a turn for the worst, and 2 friends must deal with their actions.
Oh, that's good. No spoilers there.
That's a segue into we are going to spoil this film now. So if you think that this film may be something that you'd be interested in checking out, probably give us a pause, come back and listen to our discussion afterwards, because we're going to get right into it and ruin this movie pretty early on. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us and coming back if you have.
Yeah,
so,
good call. And you know what was funny? I 5 minutes into this movie, I stopped it and I read the synopsis on IMDb.
Really?
Yeah, which I normally you sort of catch a glimpse of it when you select the movie on Netflix. You sort of see the little 1 or 2 line synopsis and you get an idea. I must have missed it with doing this one for whatever reason. And I was watching this film and it was fine, and I needed some direction. And as soon as I sort of read whatever it was, and it sort of said like, well, kind of what we said, 2 guys go on a hunting trip and have to, I don't know, cover up whatever it was. But I was like, okay, now I just needed that direction. Without it, this film felt a bit weird at that first 5 minutes, and I'm actually wondering whether I really read the synopsis, specifically read the synopsis now going forward, because sometimes it's nice to have a guideline.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that, because the first 15 minutes or so, I knew it was a thriller. I had no idea anything about the actual plot. So I'm sitting there for the first 15 minutes going, okay, I'm keeping an eye out, like what's happening, what's going on. So when the actual sort of event occurs, I was pretty taken back, because I didn't know that what was going to happen. So yeah, it was one of those ones you've got to stick with it.
Yeah, you do.
You don't know anything about it.
It put me at ease, and I probably enjoyed that first 15 minutes more once I knew that. I was like, okay, this is just establishing the situation, probably establishing a few key characters that had kind of come back. But I was okay. I wasn't trying to overthink it after reading it, which worked well. And sometimes it won't work well because there might be just that tiny little spoiler. Like Alex Strangelove, I didn't read that one, and I'm glad I didn't, because it said something like he's going to fall for a dude or something, and I'm like, oh, that was a nice surprise when it came in. So it's hit and miss, I guess.
Good. Okay, so let's have a chat about what we could find out about this film. What are some things that you've been able to research or discover about the making of this one?
Yeah, okay. So Matt Palmer, it's written and directed by Matt Palmer, someone I'm not familiar with prior to this, but he'd been workshopping this idea for about 9 years. And the reason that it was so long is basically because he doesn't see himself as a very prolific writer. He's generally happy to do some directing work on other people's screenplays, but he kind of had this thunderbolt of the idea, which I'm pretty sure was the notion of killing someone whilst hunting. I think that was the big idea that came into his head 9 years beforehand, and he just couldn't quite shake that. So over the period of 9 years, he ended up putting together a screenplay, and that finally got picked up. Not finally got picked up. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. He wasn't working it. He wasn't trying to sell it for 9 years. He was just workshopping it in between doing other
Okay.
work.
Yeah.
Um, and they did begin filming in November in 2016, only an hour outside of Edinburgh. Um,
Mm.
and by May 2018, that was when it first was reported that Calibre had been picked up by Netflix. From all reports, I think it was quite a long negotiation period. Netflix expressed interest in late August, and I think the deal was kind of signed and done in around February. So they kept it pretty low key, and then realized that it was a Netflix film, and then it would in turn premiere at the Edinburgh Film Festival, which was on the
Mm.
22nd of June in 2018, and then it opened on Netflix 1 week later. So it's a nice story when Netflix. I like it when Netflix get on board things prior to them doing well at a film festival. So they kind of, and I
Mm.
like hearing that it was a long negotiation period. So Netflix was interested.
Yeah.
They didn't know they weren't going to overpay, but they wanted to pay the right price, and I think it's worked out really well.
Yeah, I think, and it's worked out well for Matt Palmer as well,
Mm.
because obviously there's a little bit of a connection where Jack Lowden's sort of the main character in this
Hmm.
film, and he went on to be in
Dunkirk.
Dunkirk, directed by Christopher Nolan.
Mm.
So Nolan sort of had this sort of this connection, and then so Nolan's agent actually signed Palmer onto his team after this film, which I thought was a cool little sort of connection.
For Dunkirk, or
Obviously,
just
yeah.
just in general?
Sorry, so signed Palmer onto his
Oh,
agency.
into his agency. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah, onto his agency. Yeah. So the same. So Nolan's got the same agent
Right,
that
as Matt Palmer.
Palmer does now. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool as
From
well.
what I can gather, Jack Lowden, so he signed on for Calibre, and not
Hmm.
too long after he signed on for Dunkirk, and the whole thing was, we're bloody lucky that we got him when we did, because there's no way he
Yeah,
was going to be
just in
doing this
time.
film after he did Dunkirk.
After did Dunkirk. Yeah. So yeah, it all sort of worked in place a little bit there for to actually have him to be able to make the film, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the Matt Palmer, we're talking about the director. He actually he does like a little sort of a Hitchcock sort of thing where he plays a character in the background. So in the village, there's a scene where they're sort of building up to this festival, and he sort of walks past. So I thought that was cool that he has a cool little cameo for himself in
I
there.
would absolutely
Uh,
do that if I was a director, and do it in ways I would not have a speaking role. I would be a genuine extra, but I would put myself in every film just to be there. I think it's really cool when directors do that. I don't want them to overdo it, but just to be there, I'm all for it.
and you get an acting credit as well.
True.
On top. The other so this one you mentioned that it played the Edinburgh International Film Festival, and it also had a limited release at a few cinemas in the UK from October through to November that year as well. So to how many is that? 4 months after it had already been on Netflix, which was an interesting sort of move, I guess. But obviously, it was received fairly well, and
I think that's
that was
really
probably
cool.
seen through. Yeah, and and that's seen through some of the awards it was nominated for as
Well,
well.
that's good call.
You know, yeah, it won Best British Feature at that Edinburgh International Film Festival that we spoke about, and also nominated for 3 awards at the British Independent Film Awards, and the Scotland BAFTAs as well. It had a win for Jack Lowden as an actor and 4 other noms. So nice little sort of trophy cabinet build up, or nominations at least there for.
Absolutely, yeah. So it nominated for 5 awards at the BAFTAs in Scotland. Jack
Mm,
Lowden won for Best Actor. Do you know who he
mm.
beat?
There was the other 2 that were in the film, wasn't it?
And
Was
that
that
was
right?
it. They were the only 3 nominated
Oh,
for
is that
Best
it?
Actor. So
Well,
but I
that
mean,
still
that
looks
says a
good.
lot for the film in Scotland, right? And I think that goes to show why they gave it a cinema release. There's some sort of like national pride in the fact that, hey, look at this national film that we made. Let's everyone go watch
Mm,
it. I guess it would be the same, Jesse, as when we did Cargo, which was the first Australian film that we'd had on Netflix as a Netflix original. Sorry. Could you imagine if
mm.
Cargo released on Netflix, and then 3 or 4 months later it went into a few independent cinemas in Australia, and we could sort of celebrate it and go, hey, look at this great Aussie film that never actually made it to our theaters because of the distribution deal with Netflix. But you know what?
Yeah.
Let's go out and enjoy it. So I think that's a really cool thing. I'm all for it.
Yeah, and another thing that sort of added to this sort of, I guess, hype that it had was that it got Stephen King's tick of approval. So Stephen King put out a tweet where he said, Calibre on Netflix. This is what do you say? He said this one is a genuine nail biter. It's got a Hitchcock vibe with a little bit of the Wicker Man tossed in for good measure. And
Wow.
that was retweeted and liked by so many people. So obviously it helped build up a bit of an audience for this one as well, to get one of the master storytellers of thriller horror sort of genre to promote your work, I guess.
That's cool. Hey, don't pretend like Stephen King needs to be retweeted, mate. He just puts it out himself, and it does its business.
Sure does. I love following him on social media. He's so good. The other thing as well is deep in IMDb there was sort of like these little like connections sort of tab that I clicked on,
Okay,
and it said it's the same plot as this film called Super Dark Times from 2017.
interesting.
And I was like, I'm very intrigued. So I had a click, and I was like, oh, that's on Netflix. So I watched it. I was like, I'm
Wow.
gonna watch this. Yeah, I'm gonna watch this to see, why someone would go on IMDb and say it's exactly the same sort of plot. And um, yes, it's similar. The crux of the story is similar, but it's completely different in the way that the characters deal with this sort of event that happens. That's very like like we've already said we're going to spoil it,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
covering up the accidental death of someone. So yeah, if you liked this film and you're interested in a film that's very similar and looks at the same sort of themes but does it through much younger sort of, it's more a teen film,
Right. Okay.
and they're teenaged kids. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that Super Dark Time. So gets my tick of approval. If you enjoyed this one, go ahead and watch
I
that
am
one too. I'd
so
say.
impressed with the effort you have gone to for our fans on this podcast that you found a little tidbit on IMDb, and I thought you were going to say,
Hmm.
so I found it, and then I watched the trailer, and you know what? Yeah, it looks similar, but you punched out the whole film. I love it.
I was like, I can't not watch this whole like I can't bring it up on the podcast and be like, oh, it's meant to be the same, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with myself if I didn't actually watch the film. And it's got one similarity, but the rest is so different, and it's just a really good way of looking at the same sort of event, but done in a completely different way. So appreciated that.
Maybe you should
So thank you to the person who,
write a comment on IMDb
yeah,
saying really similar to this movie, but a lot of
similar.
differences.
Yeah, I think I should because but yeah, it was without that comment I wouldn't have found it. So I was happy to find that one. That was good.
Well done, mate. I'm impressed.
I had a Netflix percentage match for Caliber. Did you?
No, I didn't, unfortunately.
I had a 63% match
Not
for this
great.
one, which not great. No, it's on the lower side. But I guess while we're talking about percentages, what sort of percentages have we got from some of the consensus for this one for the critics and the
Oh, look at
audiences?
you with your segue.
Come on, don't bring it up. I was like, let's just run smoothly. Let's just do it.
It's really positive. It's a 6.7 out of 10 on IMDb. 19,000 ratings. I got a friend who I work with who is quite into thriller films, and she says, "Look, if you see a thriller film that you think I might like, let me know." And I told her about this
Hmm,
yesterday after when I spoke to her, and she had a look on IMDb straight away. She said, "Oh, it's got a 6.7 out of 10 on IMDb. That's pretty good." So it's good to know that the general movie going audience does know that a 6.7 is a good score.
good. Now, hopefully, listen to our podcast after she's watched it.
Yeah. It's well, this is the thing. We've had so many dud films that have low scores that when you see something over a 6, you're like, "Whew, that's beautiful."
Hmm,
It's very similar on Letterboxd as well. It's a 3.3 out of 5. Only 8,000 ratings, which is still a solid enough sample size, but a bit less than IMDb, but still really, yeah, really popular.
yeah. This one had 86% of Google users enjoyed this one,
Okay.
so that's a positive as well. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at 95%
Wow.
on only on 19 reviews though, so it's not
Eh,
a
it's not
consensus or
bad
anything,
though.
but it's still fresh. And the audience was a little bit lower, probably reflects a little bit more the IMDb and Letterboxd scores at 72%.
Still really good.
That's on 650 odd. So yeah, obviously very well received this film all
Yeah.
around.
That's the one thing I don't want to see before I watch it. I don't want to see the consensus of a film before I watch it. Because as much as
Hmm.
I like to pride myself on how I feel about a film without being not using other people's judgments, but if I'm seeing a film that I know is like a 4 out of 10, I'm like, even if I'm enjoying it, it's gonna get shit or something like that's gonna happen where it's gonna go bad. So I don't like knowing that stuff.
Good. All right. Well, time for our early thoughts, I think. So, MJ, what do you think about this one before we break into it a bit more?
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I think I think the intensity of the film, which I loved the intensity of it. I think that probably comes more from the sheer heartache of the actual circumstances. But there's a well enough story constructed around it that kind of aids your viewing anyway. But there was definite moments of breathlessness and tension. Um, but the probably thing I enjoyed the most was the questions that I asked myself, and will probably subsequently ask
Mm.
you throughout this podcast, because it just had me questioning so many things. What would I do? What's the thing? What's the right thing to do morally? Really, just
Mm.
non-stop racking my brain during this film. So um, it's good.
Yeah, there's multiple times throughout where you're like, oh, what would I do in that situation?
Mm.
And then it sort of gets to that stage where like, I don't even know if I want to contemplate what I'd do in that situation because it's just so full on.
It's yeah, it's
But yeah, I
devastating. I don't want
completely
to be
agree.
in it.
Nah. Yeah, I'm similar. I thought it was really well made. The tension for me as well is, it was so high throughout this film that, they did this really good job for me as well, like of creating this build of what was going to happen because I didn't pick at all what the catalyst was going to be, and while they give you glimpses early on of sort of character traits, it sort of doesn't prepare you for what you're going to see on the screen. So
Mm.
I appreciated that as well, and yeah, I think this was a good one too.
I think you're probably right in the sense that so much of watching this film, I was like, how do you end this film? What what
Mm,
story, what message are you trying to give me? I don't know how you're going to end this film, and they do a really good job of getting to that point. But that's probably what kept me going because I'm like, are they gonna find the body? They're not going to find the body. Are they going to get caught? They're not going to get caught. Like so many things. I'm like this could end in a multitude of ways, and it could work. And I just wasn't sure what route they were
mm.
going to go down.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. It was, and I don't even know if I'm happy with the end.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, like because you think about the different situations how they could have ended it, but I'm sure we'll probably talk about that a
Mm.
little bit later on as well. Time for some characters. So hit us off with who you'd like to speak about first in this one.
Well, I think one of the reasons this film worked well for me on a relatability scale was because of Vaughn as a character. He was just so
Mm,
normal. He was so out of his depth, and I mean, like even out of his depth hunting, let alone covering up an accidental murder. And
mm,
every moral conundrum that he had to encounter was something that I found myself, as I said, trying to encounter as well because I was him in this film. And it's a really powerful way of filmmaking to make that relatability about a situation where the circumstances are so far from anything that's relatable. But so quickly they set you up as, oh, by the way, this is just an everyman, and you're exactly like him. So don't think that you're watching something and you're not going to be able to make decisions yourself because you're in his shoes, and it was awesome.
and I yeah, I probably even had a even more relatability with a baby on the way. Like I was sitting there going, so this guy's got a baby on the way. I got a baby on the way. And I was like, oh, this is the worst situation that you could possibly,
Do you want to go hunting
see a
this weekend?
character
By the
be
way,
put in.
are you free? Because I'm
No, I don't know. If it's something that you like and I don't really like, why would you want to do that if you're my friend? But yeah, I mean, this idea of these last few days of freedom that he's got, and it was just yeah, this guy got put into a situation that he probably never should have been put in the first place, and the type of character he was, you wanted him to make better choices, I guess, at stages throughout. I did anyway.
but
I
yeah,
don't want to speak for anyone. Yeah, I know. It's a
choices
really, really tough
versus
one.
like he almost wasn't even making them. Like
Well, yeah, he didn't have the opportunity to.
yeah,
I guess that sort of leads us into Marcus, and probably his mate who's he's organised this weekend for him and to go hunting, but like I sort of mentioned already, like Vaughn didn't have an interest in it. So what sort of is he really that good a friend? And that sort of conflicted me a little bit because I was like, if my best mate's taken me out before I have a baby, I'm hoping that he's not going to go take me fishing or something because I couldn't stand that. And they just highlighted that this Marcus guy sort of he used drugs, and the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I didn't like him as the movie went on. And I don't know whether that was purposeful or whether that was just how I was feeling. but the idea that he was constantly telling Vaughn that he's protecting him, and
Mm.
by shooting the dad, and he's always getting us out of this, and he's doing it for both of us. But to me, this just sort of highlighted his insecurities, I guess, because he knows he's a bad person, but he just constantly wants this reassurance that he's not, even though he is, and he knows he is.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I agree with the main crux of what you're saying, because what I thought was really interesting about Marcus is it took me a long time to realize that he wasn't a good mate, and I think that's definitely deliberate. Like, they didn't want you
mm,
to think from the start that this guy is a little bit of a villain and he's super expendable, and if there's a trade off, he'll get traded off. You don't want to think that. Um,
true.
I definitely don't think they were best mates, because I think they're mates from childhood
Boarding
who
school.
don't
Yeah.
seem to see each other all that much anymore. And again, you get that vibe more and more as time goes on, because he was a bit of a dick, but like, not enough for me to be completely fine with him being sacrificed in the end. It was kind of more subtle. Like, there was enough evidence to suggest that this is a guy who could have been a valuable trade off for like a
Mm,
wife and an unborn child. It's a pretty tough wager, but it wasn't easy or clear decision for him to make, and I appreciated that. But when you break it down, and I kind of did this like near the end of the movie, probably in like a nanosecond, I did this in my head, that they kind of had that really awkward initial exchange when they got in the car together. He's obviously got the
yeah.
history of drugs that's still quite prevalent. He was really rude to Logan when they first met him. He hooked up with that girl despite being told not to. He was the one that instigated covering up the murder. He was the one that chose to run away. He was the one who stabbed that dog at the end. Like, the evidence was there to think that this guy's not a great guy, and if if it comes down to it, I'm kind of okay with Vaughn making this decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. I just the one thing that just sits in the back of my mind is that if he's got all these traits, and then why is Vaughn so happy to go away with him for the weekend? If he's got better friends, why aren't they doing it for him? That's just one, like, yeah, I don't know. That
Yeah,
just annoyed me a
I
little bit.
don't I don't necessarily think it was a last hurrah, because I don't think she was even showing. I think it was more just like, you're in the final stretch of being a father, and we don't catch up that often, but let's go away for the weekend. I'm sure he's got
Mm,
other mates who are going to do more with him. Um, and even the question as
yeah,
to, if they're so polar opposites, why are they mates? I just don't think they're as close as we thought they were. I think they probably were at a
right.
time, and they've grown apart a little bit. But that
Part.
first
Yep.
scene of them in the car was just really awkward. Like we
Mm.
hadn't seen someone for a while, and you kind of didn't know how we interact when it's just the two of us. I don't know. At the time, it felt weird, but looking back, I appreciate it a lot more.
No, that makes, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, completely agree with you. Um, any other characters that you want to talk about?
I want to talk about Logan. Um,
Yeah, okay, good.
and there was just this safety harness that was connected to Logan for me. I always felt like he was smart enough and savvy enough to figure things out, which didn't bode well for the boys, but also never felt like he was going to be particularly malicious about it. And it was comforting, but it was no less eerie. Like, this whole town had this eerie vibe to it, when you felt like an outsider and you felt like you weren't in on something. And that was still prevalent with Logan, but I think it cast a nice safety net to do more with the story, other than just throwing these two in this situation and making them completely fend for themselves. It added a nice dimension, and
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that, yeah, they did a really good job of that by, like, showing, I guess, the authority he had
Oh
almost, or
yeah.
the respect that the town had of him, because without having that one person that whatever he says sort of goes, that, yeah, there'd just be angst against them the whole way. So it was nice to, like you
Mm,
mentioned, to have this one character that sort of, it was like this go between, I guess, almost, that even though, yeah, did have those vibes that there was probably something off somewhere, that you still sort of thought maybe he's, like, gonna he'll have these guys back, even though he may have been a little bit cautious,
yeah.
or not cautious, but yeah, concerned about. I don't even know what the
Yeah, I know
right
what you
word is,
mean.
but yeah, I think you know what I mean. Yeah,
There was an idea of him having just that level of common sense about him that maybe the rest of the town didn't have, and
sounds good.
because he authority, wielded that authority, then it kind of was a nice mixture for them to be able to lean on him to some extent.
Yep. Yeah. Good. What did you think about the two girls, like Kara and was it Iona?
Iona, yeah.
Iona, I think. Yeah, like I thought that I, I liked Iona a little bit
Oh
because
yeah.
she sort of had that. She's connected with that whole, and we'll probably get into this in the themes and ideas later. But I just liked that idea that she wanted to leave and she wanted to get out, and you could almost like they teed her up nicely with Vaughn in the fact that he probably wanted to get out of this situation the whole time too. He didn't really want to be on that trip, and I just thought that was nicely done.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
she was as likable as anyone, to be perfectly honest.
Hmm.
Level-headed. She basically had their back, only to the extent that I don't think we should kill these people because it's not a very smart way to go about it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, she was worlds apart from the other girl, who was basically
Hmm.
just a vessel for
Yeah.
pain and to make them do the wrong thing. Is more than nothing. I'm not going to go much more into her.
Yep. Good. All right. The director, or I think, yeah, Matt Palmer. We've
Yeah,
mentioned him already. First feature, done a few
yeah,
shorts. Other than that, I think possibly could have a good career. Moving forward, you'd
yeah.
hope. Yes.
My thoughts
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is a really good achievement, and I'd be interested to see what he does next.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, time for some scenes.
Yeah,
This is where we go through the ones that we liked and didn't like. So, what are some ones that you enjoyed, MJ?
yeah. I love the fact that Vaughn didn't hook up with Iona on the first night. I was kind of enjoying that whole scene, and that just topped it off for me. Like there was the idea of an exciting catch up with an old buddy on a weekend away, combined with that whimsical drunken conversation with a new friend. It was really relatable and well captured. But it also set up the fact that, as I said before, I was going to be in Vaughn's shoes and I was going to follow him throughout this movie because he made that decision at the start not to hook up with her, which was the right decision. And that was the guy I thought he was. If he hooks up with her, he's a completely different guy, and it changes everything. So um, I think that
It's so
works really
good in
well.
it's it's so good in comparison to the film we did last week, Each to Our Own, where similar situation in
Oh
the
God.
first 15 minutes, the main protagonist cheats on her partner, and you don't like her from that. So they make the right choice in this film by not doing that.
But I think it's so important that people can cling on to Vaughn. Just your
Mm,
everyday person watching this movie can sit there and go, "Oh man, this guy's so out of his depth. I'd be so out of my depth. All right, what would I do? What's he going to do?" And if they had lost that, you lose that link and that relatability to the film. So kudos. The killing scene. I don't know what else to label it, but it was long and it was suffocating, but it was absolutely gripping. It just changed the entire pace of the film. The confusion, the gut wrenching emotion. I just felt everything in that scene.
yeah, that like I mentioned before, that the point of view shot through that gun, and then like you see the deer, and then
Oh
the next shot there's a kid there. Like I just wasn't expecting that at all. So
yeah.
yeah, to me, I completely agree that that had me hooked into like, yeah, see exactly what's going to happen now, sort of thing. So yeah, great scene.
And then right off the back of that, there was that confrontation they had about creating the alibi because I thought that was a great comparison of this level-headed callousness versus the completely shocked and broken. And in that situation, the level head's always going to win out, even though
Mm.
it was the wrong move. But it's so quickly you start to justify why it's actually the right move. Because Vaughn just had this "I can't do this" attitude set up, and that's when you think this is going to be a really interesting series of events that are coming off the back of this. Because this man isn't happy with this decision, but God, he kind of gets the logic behind it. If I don't get
Mm.
caught, and if I can learn to live with myself, then this is going to be a lot better than turning myself in, right? Like it's this moral conundrum that starts here and doesn't really end.
No, and yeah, it just builds more and more. The tension continues
Oh
from
yeah.
that, that choice that's made.
Well, to that
Good.
point, the next scene that I do have is when their tires got slashed, and that just made the
Mm.
tension basically unstoppable. That made them
Mm.
stuck. That made them completely just sitting ducks almost. And when that happened, because you sort of sit there and think, oh, there's like 40 minutes to go. They kind of have a bit of an out here. They can sort of just get up and leave. And when that happened, it's like, oh, it's them against the town. You're starting to learn more and more about the town, and everyone seems to be a little bit weary. And it was a nice little. I guess it was just a plot device, but it worked quite well.
It's amazing how the whole bloody town were there, like in 2 seconds when they come downstairs.
The
Yeah.
last scene that I do have is the scene in the barn or whatever when Vaughn has to make that decision and that internal battle. It was exactly what I was going through. I kid you not, I was making these decisions and changing my mind as time went on.
Mhm.
I think he's standing down the race with the gun, and I felt like this is going to be impossible. Like you're just going to drop the gun and kill us both. And then I was starting to think, am I okay with that ending? Oh, maybe I am because I can't kill my mate. I just can't do it. And as it went on, and as I thought more, I realized that maybe this sacrifice will be worth it. And maybe these two aren't as close. Like they're obviously morally opposed, and Marcus has sort of dug this hole for both of them. And ultimately, that wife and kid factor won over, and I get it. And like a second before he pulled that trigger, I decided that you should pull the trigger. It was crazy how I was doing this in my head while I was watching that scene. And I came to
And
the
they
same
give you the
resolution.
time, yeah, and they give you the time to think it out too. The
Yeah.
build up to like the way that the camera just stays there and gives him that chance where you think it's not going to happen, and everyone turns their backs, and then it's just like no, it happens.
When they turn their
Yeah.
backs and you're like, okay, this is real, mate. You are actually gonna get shot if you don't do this. And
Mm.
it was a brilliant scene, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good. All right, some scenes that
What did I miss?
I didn't mind, I guess. Nah, it's nah. They oh, mine are probably stupid compared to yours, to be honest. My first one is that when they first rock up to the pub, they ordered IPAs. I was like, that is so cool. I was like, I don't
it,
think I've seen people go up to a bar in a film and be like, I'll have two IPAs, please. I was like,
it
that sounds
literally
better
said
than
IPA on the tap. That's like all
yeah,
it
he
said.
did. Yeah, it was great. I thought that was really good. The other thing that that I enjoyed, it was another scene, sort of in the pub or in the restaurant of the pub where they sit down to have this meal after they've committed this crime, and I just thought that the way they set that table up with the foods and you got the red wine, the juices of the meat, which is bringing up these memories of blood and enough to
Mm.
make Vaughn sick to go to the bathroom. I just thought that was really really well done. I really enjoyed that.
To that point, actually, I meant to
And
mention this earlier. It was a really, really good performance by Jack Lowden. Like it was, he had
mm,
to illustrate that heartbreak, that constant feeling on edge, and then buying into everything before becoming almost exhausted and almost giving up. It was like a roller coaster of emotions for this
mm.
character, and he was fantastic doing it.
Yes, very very good. The another scene that I enjoyed was Marcus. He did these rants a lot where he's talking about I'm protecting
Mm,
you, Vaughn. I'm protecting you, Vaughn. And it was towards the end, and Vaughn says we were wrong and we're going to pay for it.
mm,
And Marcus's response was like so you're telling me that I was wrong to protect you. So he brings it back to himself as in I was doing the right thing. And then I really love the follow up where Vaughn says you were Marcus. Otherwise you wouldn't ask. You're wrong.
yeah.
And I really thought that was a really impactful little conversation between the two to sort of fully like explain that how the two feel about each other really, or how Vaughn feels about Marcus and his actions, I guess.
Yeah, Vaughn's finally
Um,
had the time to get some clarity around it, and he's like, you know what? It was the wrong decision, and you know it.
mm, yeah. The last one I've got is Vaughn sort of telling the story when he's been sort of caught at the end, and he's in that barn and he's tied up, and he tells the whole story to the town people, and as the audience, well, there's no dialogue, and the sound sort of becomes inaudible, and you just get these little flashes, and
Mm,
the grief on his face as he retells the story. I thought that was really really well done
mm.
as well.
Yeah, you're
It's
right.
just some nice little pieces. Yeah. Okay. What are some things that you didn't like in this one?
Yeah, there's not too much to be perfectly honest. After they after they killed the people and then they kind of tried to do their whole alibi thing and drive around, it got to nighttime really quickly, and that sort of bothered me a little bit. It was 10 a.m. and they were hunting for a little bit, and then they shot someone, they drove somewhere to a server, whatever, and then it was nighttime, and it
Hmm.
just didn't. It just kind of felt like a really jerky way of ending that kind of part of the day. Not a big deal. It just
No.
was,
Okay.
it felt
So
weird.
yeah.
Um, I didn't like that they went to the festival. I get it from a story perspective, but it's not a decision that I would think that those guys would have made. And I think they were also really well justified to avoid it when they were sitting in the room and the guys like, "Hey, come on down." I think they'd be like, "Look, with everything that's gone on, we've obviously had that kerfuffle at the car where the bloke headbutted him and stuff, and you know what? We're just going to sit this one out." I get it. The story had to sort of bring him out, but it didn't make sense to me that they went there. So I think you could have found another
It
way
didn't
to.
make sense to me. It didn't make sense too with like, it's such a small town and you've got half the town that are still worried about these
Yeah,
missing people that they're still going ahead with the
that's a
festival. It
very
didn't
good
make
point,
any sense.
actually. That's a really good
Yeah.
point. Like, put out a search
And
party with
then
more than 6 people or whatever.
I was like, surely everyone in the town's going to be out helping, or you're going to cancel this bonfire, or
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It
great.
was a
It's
bit
a
weird.
great point. And the final thing I didn't like was when Marcus stabbed that dog. It kind of made it too much. Like, it was just adding fuel to the fire. Like, these guys, they hate you right now. They've already caught you. Like,
Mm.
just almost put yourself in. And I think I was just repeating, like, oh, come on, oh, what are you doing? Oh, like, it was a physical response that I got from seeing it, and I guess it was just that final blow into the character of Marcus, where you're like, you know what, I could sacrifice you. So, but I didn't like that scene. So that's it
Okay,
though. That's
nice.
three
Yeah, not
really
much.
nitpicky type things.
Yeah, I think mine are probably going to be the same little nitpicky things. The the kid at that hotel, like when they first arrive at the hotel and he doesn't speak, and then obviously after they've committed these crimes and they arrive back at night and he's looking out the window at them,
Mm.
and then at that bonfire party too, just like these weird camera shots that that they've got their eyes on this kid. I just didn't like that it was like one of those sort of misleads that they were trying to say that this kid's going to rat them out or something. And I know that in a thriller film, you're going to have these multiple, options or ideas in the back of the audience's mind about how they're going to be, found out. But I just thought that that was a loose end that didn't really add anything to the story
I didn't
because
think
there was
that was a
the
mislead.
tension was already there.
I think he did rat
Really?
them out. So, or if he didn't rat them out, he put enough doubt in their mind for Marcus to say when they said, "Well, what were you guys doing last night?" So I'm when he asked, "What were you guys doing last night?" He's like, "Oh, we went night hunting." I was assuming that the boy said, "Hey, I saw these two roll up," and that's why they said, "What were you doing last night?"
Because I didn't see the kid talk like barely at all. The bonfire scene at the end, maybe he had like a little bit of a conversation with the mum that he was with.
Yeah,
But
it might not have been
the
on screen where he said it though. I must admit, I assumed that he told them that he saw those guys,
okay,
and that's why they
all right,
said, "Why were you out last night?" And even if he didn't, they still asked that question. And the fact that they got spotted meant because he would have just said, "Oh, nothing. We were just in our room," but he knew that they got seen, so he had to lie and say they're out night hunting, which is and that worked for me. That it just culminated more and more of this is stacking up against these guys. If you find the bodies, you're absolutely
yeah,
screwed.
yeah. I thought the townspeople did a good job of asking questions all the time that you thought they were asking about what they'd done, and then
Mm,
it led to something else. So
yeah, that was good.
yeah, but if yeah, that yeah. Anyway, the blood on the backpack that sort of frustrated me too. So there were so many shots like, building this tension, trying to hide the backpack under the
Mm,
table at the bar and all that sort of stuff. They could have easily, like with the amount of blood from Marcus's face and
thought
then
that.
his nose being snapped, they could have surely could have covered it up and been like, oh, his nose just bled on the bag or
I
something.
thought
It's like
that too.
that didn't work for me. Good.
It
um,
just showed Vaughn's like he was just completely destroyed by all this tension that was being
yeah.
created. But you're right. I thought the exact same thing. I'm like, just pretend like
Yeah.
you got the blood on it.
Hmm. I've only got one other one. The final scene. We've already said with spoiler alert, but it cuts back to Vaughn's back at his house with his
Mm.
wife. The baby's crying. I honestly thought he was gonna walk into the kid and then talk to the kid and say, "Call the kid Marcus" or
I
something.
thought the
I don't
same
know.
thing.
Yeah,
I
did you? Okay,
thought
all
the
right.
same thing, and I'm glad that he
Okay.
did it. But
Yeah, I'm glad he didn't too. But just to if they've done that for two of us to put that in our minds that was going to happen, it ruins the scene. It ruins the scene. If they've done a good enough job to create that in our minds,
it's
like I
funny.
was like, oh, that just annoyed me.
Yeah, I was trying to think what it means if he calls it Marcus, but yeah, I thought that as well.
Okay, good. Well, that's all me done with the scene. So it's time to move on to the themes or ideas or motifs from this one. This was saying quite a bit, I
Mm.
think. So, what have you got, MJ, for this one?
Well, initially, it's that whole moral compass versus logical compass, because you can be put in that position and completely justify to yourself why you should cover that up. I get it, and I've never been in that position. I don't want to be in that position, but there is a decision to be made that cover that up, never get caught, and your life is vastly better in in theory than what it would be as if
Mm.
you dob yourself in. And that the film asks that question almost the whole time, and eventually the idea of the morals kind of wins out, but doesn't really win out as well. And I'll get to this a bit later with like where he still ends up morally, but that's probably one of the main things that the film does really really well.
Mm, I agree. Have you got anything else?
I got look. The tagline of the film is "You can't bury the truth."
Ooh, I didn't see that. That's a good one.
Yeah. How does that change the situation that he's currently in? Because
Mhm.
he leaves the town having to cover up a truth. He has to
Mm.
pretend something that happened that didn't happen. So he's kind of no better off. In fact, he's worse off because his mate's dead.
His
Um,
mate's dead, and he's got
and
that
he's
guilt
still
on the
got the
back of it.
guilt, and he's still got to lie
Yeah,
about it and cover it up. Um,
yeah.
so maybe it's
Mm.
true. You honestly, you really can't bury the truth, even though he's trying to. And that's what gets me to the point that he doesn't end this film in a very good spot.
No, I don't think you could see that in the emotion on his face, or the it was just yeah. I don't think he was doing very well at
No.
all. And he wasn't in bed. He was sitting up in the chair.
Yeah, and he's
Like yeah,
and
I
that
think
was,
he.
you know what, I'm going to ask this now, even though I was going to get to it in questions. Do you think that he ever sleeps again? Like, do you think he ever has a good night's sleep again? Because
No, I don't think so.
nah, neither
If
do I.
no, no matter how poor a friend that person was, he's committed murder.
Oh, the whole
Not
circumstances are,
not once, but twice.
yeah,
Um, so he not only has that that thought that he's killed a child, he's also killed a friend.
it would never leave
So
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
he no, so he's definitely not doing. He's a lot worse off than he was at the start
So
of the
that's why I
film
did
for sure.
appreciate the last scene in the sense that he was just sitting there when she woke up. I'm like, good, because you know what? If he was sitting there sound asleep, going, "Hey, what a great result! I got my wife and kid. This is
Mm,
awesome. Well done, good choice." When he was sitting up there, I'm like, cool, that's exactly what I would be doing, and I'd probably be doing it for the rest of my bloody life.
yeah, and I liked that idea too, like with this feeling of guilt, like they put emphasis on him saying sorry multiple times,
Mm,
and sometimes sorry it's not enough, and um and obviously in this, like, you can't say sorry for the things that he's done in this, and um yeah, it's a real tricky one too, because there's this idea that you sort of see through these townspeople, between this idea of like forgiveness and retribution as well, and it's sort of the townspeople, apart from Logan, like they had this, and they did this mainly through men, that this sort of toxic masculinity, where they're like, an eye for an eye sort of thing,
mm,
and I liked that balance that Logan gave to that sort of idea as well.
mm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's a
and
point.
I've mentioned as well, like, yeah, this sort of limit of friendship too. Like, how good of friends were they really? Because, and we've already discussed this, but I just, what is the limit of a friend? Like, because if you're happy at the end to kill this friend to preserve yourself, I still struggle. I still struggle with this idea,
Yeah,
no matter how many different things ways we look at it, I
I
guess.
agree, but I think it
Yeah,
gives it that extra weight of having a wife and unborn child at home
yeah,
gives it a little bit more weight than preserve yourself. You're preserving more than just
yeah.
yourself in that sense. But
Mm,
that's why my initial thought when that situation came to rise, I was like, "Wow, he can't do it. They're both gonna die." And
mm,
I'd be like, you know what? That's how my life ends. Okay, I can't do this. If we got to both die, we both die. And then I thought about
mm.
it the way he did. So um, I like the fact that it's not an easy choice, but yeah, I understand that that you're not 100% sold on it.
Yeah. Last thing that I wanted to briefly touch on too was this sort of idea of the this rural community versus sort of the urban community, and they highlight this a lot, that these new and upcoming sort of country clubs and things are draining this
Mm,
town, and that they reach out to Marcus by giving a business card saying, hey, we need
mm,
your help with an investment and
Mm.
things like that. And I think they did that as a nice little side sort of thing on as well. It wasn't just this whole town of, sometimes a horror thriller film, you see
Mm.
this town of hicks that
Yep.
are just out with the pitchforks, and they're willing to challenge anything that's different
Yep.
or new. Whereas they didn't go that full way, but they still had that nice underlying idea of that too.
It's a good point, and they said there's that eeriness to the town, but it wasn't
Mm,
because if you set that town in a town full of hicks that are sort of really irresponsible and hard to read, the film still works, and a lot of films have been done like that, but it's just very very different, and it's kind of
mm,
you sort of appreciate the realism that they try to get with this film. It feels a lot
mm.
more real
Yeah,
than otherwise.
yeah, I appreciated that. All right, I think we're up to, what did we take away from this one?
Yeah,
So
well,
what did you take away from this? Yeah.
it's not quite on the breathlessness scale of The Invitation or No Escape, or probably even, to be honest, Clinical that we did on Netflix a long time ago. But
Mm,
that feeling of tension and unease is definitely what I'm going to be taking out of this film, and what I'll be using as a recommendation as well.
yep.
If people want to watch a good thriller that's going to keep them on the edge of their seat, then this fits the bill.
Yeah, I'm
Also, beautiful
exactly the same
scenery,
for. Yeah.
really
Oh
nice
yeah,
scenery.
uh, I watched right through the credits to sort of check out the exact locations, and I wrote down, just in case I ever do get to Scotland, at some stage, that there's these little towns that I wouldn't mind checking out because yeah, just absolutely beautiful.
Don't want to go to that one though. Just don't. I wouldn't mind avoiding
Just don't
that
go to the
one.
woods.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to the woods. Uh, the other, yeah. So I'm the same. Like, for a small film, this did a lot of right. And the same with you. The tension, it had me worried every sort of turn about how they were going to get out of this. And this is one that I haven't said in a while, but this probably would have been better in a dark cinema, no lights on, just to even like I got that tension from watching it on a screen in a house. Imagine how good it would have been in a darkened cinema.
Would have been a killer. Yeah, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
I watch as often as I can. I watch every movie in the dark. Um,
Hmm.
and I was watching this in a room with a nice big TV, and it was pitch black in the room. So I got that experience to some extent, but there's nothing quite like the surround sound at a cinema, being completely engaged
Hmm.
on a big screen and sort of feeling the vibe off the rest of the audience.
Yeah, really looking forward to being able to
Yeah.
get back into the cinemas.
I got some
All right,
I got
IMDb time.
I've got
Oh,
some
sorry.
cinema vouchers
Oh,
for a gift that were going to expire, and so I wrote to the chain and I said, so these are going to expire, but I obviously can't go to the movies right now. They've given me an extension till October 31 on the gift card, so hopefully October 31 there's something open so I could use them.
July. We'll just hang out and see what Nolan does with our Tenant, and then we'll go from there. If that gets a release, I reckon we'll start seeing some others start putting some out, no matter what sort of numbers
Very very
cinemas
interesting.
that are open, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, sorry for cutting you off, but
Anyway.
time for IMDb time. I cut you off before, so did you jump on IMDb to check anyone out at any stage in this one?
I did, but this is kind of a cheat one. I actually didn't do this during the film, and I actually didn't really recognize him either. But afterwards, I wanted to find out more about Tony Curran, who played Logan. Not necessarily because he was
Okay.
that familiar, but something about me just wanted to see
Mm,
more of him. And
mm,
interestingly, he was in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is a personal favorite of mine, and I watched it recently. He plays the Invisible Man in that, which you don't actually
ah,
see. So,
yep.
so maybe there was something about the voice that I recognized because he's always the only time you see him is when he's got sort of white paint on his face. But I found that very interesting that just recently I'd watched it and I thought about, and I actually, when I watched it, I was like, I wonder who plays the Invisible Man. I clicked on, Tony Curran. All right, never heard of him. And yeah, it came back full circle. So it wasn't a proper IMDb, but I wanted to bring it up anyway.
It counts. It definitely counts. I got on for Jack Lowden. The It wasn't for Dunkirk, so I was like, I know your face from somewhere. So I looked. I was like, he's from that movie called Fighting with My Family that
Oh
came out
yeah,
last
yeah,
year with Florence Pugh, the sort of WWE film.
yep.
He's her brother in that. So I was like, okay, that I remember exactly why I recognize your face now.
That's a win.
That's yeah, and that's a very good film. Fighting with My Family, I
I've
thoroughly
got
enjoyed that.
I've
A
got it on
lot
record
lot better than
on
I thought.
Foxtel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice, good. Let me know what you think because I think you might enjoy that one.
Yeah.
It's a nice little story. Okay, question time. This is where we can ask each other anything from the film that we want to know, and I think we've probably asked a few already from each of our more from my list as well already. But have you got
Mm.
anything else you want to ask?
I do have a few. Um,
Hmm.
would you have cut the bullet out of the skull?
No, that was full on.
I would have.
That was
I would
so
have.
full
If you're
on.
gonna do it,
Yeah.
you got to do it properly. It was actually kind of smart, but I remember just thinking like, "Oh God, no, no, you can't." And I was like, "No, what? He's got to do it."
Yep. Okay.
Next question.
Fair. Well, yes. Go.
How do you think Vaughn would have reacted if he was by himself? How does this
Where?
story go when he
Oh,
shoots
like as
shoots the
in
kid?
no family, no kids, or
So no, if
oh,
he's not with
no.
Marcus, bang, shoots the kid.
Oh, he'd definitely go to the police
Yeah,
and say this was an accidental shooting.
I think that's what makes this story really
Yeah,
interesting. You got a guy who would do that, and they take that decision away from him almost.
yeah, straight away. Yeah, Marcus definitely takes that away from him,
Yeah,
and
but he was
if
almost gonna
anything
get shot. Like you can't forget that.
by the dad, yeah,
Yeah.
true, very true. Okay, good. What else?
And this is my last one. When they
Hmm.
started the search party, did you agree with Marcus
Mhm.
or Vaughn? Were they onto them, or was it a legit search party? When they wrote them in, they were like, "Oh,
Well,
they're onto
yeah,
us." Do you think they were, or do you think they just wanted help?
I okay, so I thought when I was watching it that they wanted their help. It was a legit search party. But then when they get in the car and drive
Yep.
off, and the car leaks
Yeah.
gas, that to me says okay, it's been sabotaged
Yeah.
somewhere. So they were onto them.
So I think we knew that afterwards, but I mean at the time, so you thought,
Yeah,
no, they just want a search
yeah. I
party.
thought, yep. Well, Logan asked them because no one else was going to ask him. So,
Yeah, I know.
and to me, Logan had been good to them. So I don't understand why you wouldn't go with him.
It all just felt. You know what? When I realized they were onto them, when they're like, "Oh, by the way, your Jeep's here," I was like, "Oh, something's not right here." They want their help, but
Mm,
they've also just bought their car back and everything's ready to go. I feel like it was going to be an ambush.
okay, good. All right, my turn.
Mm.
The title, Caliber. I really like this title, and I want to. Hopefully, you agree with me because obviously, Caliber's like the character of someone as well as that the the barrel of the gun. So, did you like the title?
Yeah, that's it's really good. It's really, you know what? It's unfortunately not a very sexy title that you can tell people about, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that one." Um,
Mm,
but it is a clever, and I love a title with double meaning.
good. The deer at the start that they're lining up to shoot,
Mm.
was that deer actually there in the first place, or was it they were both like so hungover that it wasn't actually there?
No, it was definitely there.
It was definitely. Then how did the kid like if that was there and then you have one quick little turn away and there's a kid there, like how quick's that deer?
Nah, Marcus wasn't that hungover. Like Marcus is like a genuine
Oh, sorry,
functioning,
sorry. Marcus was on drugs. He
but
was
he,
on
but, he,
drugs.
but he's a functioning alcoholic
Ugh.
basically, and because remember he wakes up, he's not hungover. Nah, well,
Yeah, there's a deer
I'm
there.
pretty sure there's a deer there. Yeah, and the kid just sort of
Okay.
popped up because yeah, you reckon they were hunting the kid and they thought, nah, that's just not the kind of film that he made.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just probably me just overthinking it because I was like, it just didn't make sense that a kid was able to get there so close to where the deer was. There's no way that that deer would have still been there if there was a kid that
I'd
close.
like to watch it again, but the kid seemed to be a fair bit behind, and it's almost like the deer like lifted its neck and then exposed the kid.
I suppose. Okay,
But I wouldn't
so the
mind
kid was
watching that
behind.
again just to double check.
Hmm. All right. So obviously the kid dies and the dad dies.
Hmm.
Surely the dad would have had a cell phone in his pocket that they could have tracked him.
Did this seem
That would
like
have been the
a
first. If
really cell phone kind of town? I don't know.
surely that would have been the first thing that you would have done is go through his pockets and take out anything that's in his pockets to
True.
make sure there's no, you know, I don't know, like a bush radio or anything like that. I
Yeah,
don't know. That was just something that annoyed me.
it's a good point. Yeah, you'd want to be safe, wouldn't you? Make sure there's nothing to track him. Good
Yeah.
call.
Well, he goes far enough to cut a bullet out of a head. Surely that's something else you'd think about. Last one, and I just, the end. Do you shoot your friend to survive?
um. Oh Jesus, man. Like my initial instinct was no. Like, sorry, I
Mm,
can't do it. And if you're gonna kill me, then that's got to happen. But I kind of turned a little bit at the time on
Mm.
on on reflection, is it the right? I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't want to. I don't want to have
Yeah,
to deal with it.
because if that was me, I'd already killed someone, and then I'm gonna kill someone else. So I've got to live with killing two people. So if I was in that situation, I would probably put the gun to myself, and that way I rest at peace that knowing that I didn't have to kill my friend. I don't know.
But
It's
then you're
it's a tricky
taking
one because
yourself away from your wife and your unborn child. Like that's the
I
only
know it's
thing that gets
a
me.
tough one. But if you've done something that bad, like I don't know if I could live with myself if that situation had occurred.
Yeah, you'd almost have to, if you got to it, you'd have to dob yourself in, do it and dob yourself
Yeah,
in and go, look, this happened. What's my time?
yeah.
But you know what?
And
If
I
you
don't
do
think
20
if
years
I
in
was in a
jail, do you live with that still afterwards? Like,
yeah, you probably would. I don't know if I was there. I don't think there'd be any like if I was in a situation with a friend who I called a friend. There's no way that I'd be covering up an accidental shooting in the first place.
I love that this movie's got us asking these questions because
Yeah, I know.
I often
It's
don't
full
ponder
on.
that, Hey, do you reckon we would
Yeah.
cover up a murder if we did it accidentally?
Man. All right. I think we're ready to wrap this one up.
Yeah.
So this is the end of the show where we each give the film a rating out of 5 to give it a Flicks Forum average. So MJ, where are you going with this one?
Look, I thought it was a pretty damn respectable thriller. It had similar breathlessness and edge of your seat qualities to some of the better thrillers of the past few years, albeit more of an insular and gritty premise, but really strong performances and a sound enough storyline to occupy the 100-minute running time. And it really did test me morally. So it's a really solid 3.5 stars for me.
Very nice. Good. Yeah. I enjoyed this one as well. I thought it was really well made for a low budget sort of film. I enjoyed following those characters and wanting to know like how they were going to get out of this or were they going to get out of this. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5.
Nice.
So that gives us a Flicks for an average of 3.25, which is a nice robust score, I think.
Yep, it's good.
One of our higher ones. Good. All right. So we're on social media. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram. Question on social media this week for this film is who was more selfish? Was it Marcus or Vaughn? And I posed this question just because I know the obvious answer is Marcus, but that final action by Vaughn to kill Marcus is a selfish action. It is about himself.
Oh, yeah,
And
it definitely
that's why,
is.
yeah,
But he's the
yeah,
only
and
one
that's
that
why I
had
was
that
like,
choice. He had all the power.
yeah, that's why I was like, I don't know how I could decide between these two characters. Whew. Anyway,
It's tough. I
I don't
still
know.
think it's Marcus.
Yeah,
Marcus
good. Yeah, well,
made
yeah.
more selfish decisions. Vaughn just made the big one.
Even yeah, yep. Good. All right. Well, if you've got a response for that one, let us know. We're back again next week. We've got another film. It is switching up again. We have got a sci-fi next
Oh,
week.
cool.
It's from 2018. It's called Tau. So it's Tau. It's directed by Federico D'Alessandro and it stars Maker Munro, Ed Skrein, and Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman.
So
There you
that
go.
one, yeah. So we've got that one up next week if
Tau.
you're interested in checking that one out with us. But whew, good discussion, MJ. That was pretty heavy.
That was good.
Go some places.
That's
that film makes you go places you do want to go.
that's one of the films that you really do need to debrief with someone afterwards. So I'm glad we got that opportunity.
For sure. All right, and I will see you next week.
You certainly will, mate. Chat to you later.
See ya.